Alrighty lads, what's up? You're with Budget Monk and welcome to a new video. So I want to jump straight into the crux of this conversation. I don't want to bait anybody around. I'm going to rant about it a little bit. I think the military hegemon has been buffed, guys, and I'm not talking about the modifiers. I'm talking about what used to suck about the military hegemon is that you couldn't obtain it. It is so much more difficult to run 1 million troops than it is to have a total income of 1 million ducats, right? I think most people would agree, as each regiment is more than 1 ducat, first of all, and then you also require the force limit or else it becomes exponentially more expensive, as well as the manpower or whatever mercs are extra expensive to recruit, to ramp up to 1 million. So I used to rank the economic hegemon much higher than the military due to the fact that it was obtainable so much earlier, which would put you in so much stronger position. I would even recommend, potentially, that you take the economic to use the autonomy in territories. If you're an extremely wide nation, the autonomy in territories is so valuable for force limit, manpower, and money, etc. And then to basically lose a war and suffer the penalty for 20 years in order to switch out 20 years later to the military hegemon. So my two advice essentially were to either take the economic purely because of the opportunity cost, just waiting to obtain the military when you could have already obtained this, or alternatively take the economic and ramp into the military. So I used to rank this as the best, this is the second best, and that is the third hegemon. And I just want to throw it out there that it does, like so many things in EU4, depend on the way that you're playing the game, and this is what I'm going to break down. But I think potentially this has taken the economic hegemon's place as the best hegemon, despite having worse modifiers. They've actually nerfed this. It used to have admin efficiency. It now has province war score costs and military points per month, as opposed to the admin efficiency that it used to generate. Despite it having worse modifiers, I think it's better due to it being more easily obtainable. So let's talk about why I believe it to be more easily obtainable. Well, I mean, this should be proof in the pudding, guys. I started as a one province miner in this particular game as the nation of Gutland, and on very hard difficulty, I have obtained it the earliest that I've ever obtained it, which means, of course, if I was playing a superpower like Castile or something, it would be a lot easier. And the method in which that we've obtained it this time has been through colonial nations. So each colonial nation has a modifier which is called increased draft. If you go to modify subject relations, you can increase draft paying a one-time only price as well as a little bit of a liberty desire, and it will actually give you 5 flat force limit. When you combine that with the fact that this has been low-key buffed, so for people who don't know, this modifier Marcher Lords now gives 100% more from colonial nations also, even though it says vassals. And that's the real takeaway, guys, is influence has been buffed. So in my mind, if you are going colonial, and you don't even necessarily need to take colonial ideas, you just need to be vigilant about jacking colonies through warfare if you're not going colonial ideas. Being very smart, potentially England colonizes Canada, you yoink Canada, and then they might move on to the East Coast, and then you yoink the East Coast, and so on and so forth. Whilst now Canada, you can pay them if they're not, but they're now colonizing, the East Coast is now colonizing. Potentially, you're going to end up getting multiple colonial regions in the same, multiple colonial nations in the same colonial region, which actually benefits you because each of them give you that modifier that I was referring to, as well as a merchant and so on if they go over 10 provinces. So with that being said, let's do a little bit of a breakdown to my specific force limit. You can see that I have from Norse religion giving us 10%, and the Grand Army that's offensive giving us a total of 25%, as well as trading in grain nowadays because it's so late game, we're so big. But keep in mind that I'm overkilling 1 million now by far. Even with that 20%, we could go over the force limit a little bit and still be there. Now, with that being said, you could simply take quantity, which I would highly recommend people do. I typically do recommend quantity, and this modifier alone eclipses the modifiers that I have from, being Norse, which you potentially will not have. Of course, you have the option to take offensive and quantity, as well as the manpower and manpower recovery here are going to make it a lot easier to, ramp up to 1 million as well. So keep in mind that I'm not doing anything crazy. and that those modifiers aren't that impressive. Now, let's take note of the 631 provinces owned directly, giving us a total of 229 force limit. Of course, it is very difficult, guys, to have a substantial amount of more states, as well as minor half stated in some cases, but when you full state them, it increases the governing capacity, and that's the reason why, right? Is because the governing capacity. So if I'm having a very good game and I'm maxed on governing capacity, it's not like you can be doing that much better, right? Like, not really. Like, you might have a nation that is more well optimized for manpower with soldiers' households as opposed to manufactories, that sort of thing. But of course, there are other limitations, like you need to generate money to run the units and so on. So it's a tough equation to think about. And this is an indication that, yes, that is pre 45% modifier, but what's 45% more of, 300? I mean, we're looking at less than 500 regiments, if I'm not mistaken, which is only halfway there. Realistically, how can you push to the military hegemon? And this used to be the issue in the past. But lo and behold, look at the sheer amount of modifiers above that. And each of these are from our colonial nations. So, I mean, just 20, 17, 19, 16, 38, 25, 41, 31, 29. And the biggest one that stands out to me is English Mexico, giving 69.4. And I just want to reiterate that these are before the 45% modifiers, guys. So, yeah, Mexico is actually contributing well over 100 regiments. Sometimes, guys, when you're paying these colonies you're subsidizing them to colonize, you've been spending ducats upon ducats upon ducats colonizing, and they give very little tariffs. I mean, even now, it's not insignificant. It's built up to something, but it's not great. You sometimes are wondering what on earth you're doing, scratching your head, but rest assured that they do give you returns, guys. Not only does he contribute his own troops and navy and so on, but he also gives us over 100 force limit. Massive. Absolutely massive. I mean, he gives us about 10% of our force limit. And yeah, so the increased colonial nation force limit contribution, as well as the extra drafts modifier, and just a general force limit focus, I think it is possible to realistically achieve an earlier military hegemon than ever before, without resorting to a crazy gimmicky game of exploits and so on. And I wanted to throw that out there, guys. I think that, one thing that comes to mind, actually, now I think about it, is the classic form Russia and Siberian frontier of the New World. And I say that because Russia has the best modifiers for force limit, at least that I know of in a pinch. And then what you can do, of course, is take the decision to move your capital to St. Petersburg, which then will release the entire New World as colonial nations, which you've paid for with Siberian Frontier. So just something that comes to mind. Alternatively, of course, Castile, playing a real powerful colonial nation and simply fighting other nations for supremacy over the New World, which will be much more realistic and achievable, even though I've done it here as a actual colonial powerhouse. And one thing I do highly recommend is, if you take a colonial idea, I think you should abandon it later, especially exploration, and replace it with influence. So obviously this is not going to do that much for you in the beginning of the game. 100% of very little is not much, but later on, much more powerful if you've, established a colonial nation in every region. They're now colonizing for themselves. Perhaps you've colonized the entire coastline of the New World, hypothetically, and as well as jacked each island as these various different colonial powers try to, migrate their colonial range. You keep taking it from them, basically trapping them within the Atlantic Ocean. If that was the case, and you could then, abandon your exploration ideas, switch it for influence, and basically pay these nations, as well as through warfare against natives and so on, dominate the world. But yeah, absolutely remarkable, guys. I'm definitely going to try to do a military hegemon rush myself at some stage after achieving this Norse, one faith, one culture, one tag, etc. over on my live stream. And I'm interested to see how early we could get it, because I'm going to tell you right now, we could obtain it pre 1600 in my mind. quite easily, as this is the earliest I've ever achieved as a one province minor start on very hard difficulty without fully making that my ultra primary focus. So I'm sure we could get it much, much earlier. And I want to throw it out there, guys. I think, yeah, colonial nations plus this, as well as, force limit contributions. I think the military hegemon has potentially, if you're specifically gunning for it, taken the #1 spot as the best hegemony in the game. And it's due to the fact that even though the modifiers have been nerfed, it is more easily accessible now. So thanks for watching. Hope this benefited you, and I'll see you live or I'll see you in another video.